Hey everyone, I'm Anthony. Welcome back to our channel. Today I'm going to be going over some features of our Bourne Off-Road winch as well as some recovery safety tips. Alright, if you want to learn how to install our winch on your vehicle, you can check out our winch installation video at this link. Okay, now before we get into the winch, just remember that winching and recovery can be extremely dangerous, so make sure you're always prioritizing safety and you're familiar with how your winch operates as well as safe recovery techniques. Alright, so first some basic safety stuff about your winch. This winch is only designed for recovery use. Never use this as a tow point, and never use this to secure your vehicle to a trailer. Doing so could add shock loads to this winch, which could damage all the components. All right, so we offer two different size winches. One's a 10,000 pound capacity and one's a 12,000 pound capacity. All of the load ratings are broken down in your user manual, but as you add layers of rope to the spool, the winch pull rating decreases. So the rating that the winches are rated at is for the first layer on the drum. So that's when your line is all the way extended and there's only one layer of rope wrapped up on your drum. So this winch operates with an electric motor. So these motors aren't designed for continuous use. If you use them for long periods of time, the motor can start to overheat. This does have protection that'll shut it down if it overheats, but you want to make sure that you're just winching in short bursts. If you have a long recovery to do, you want to go for a little while and then stop and let your winch cool down before you continue recovering. So your winch and your remote are both waterproof. Your remote is IP67 rated, so if you drop that in a puddle or anything, it's not going to damage the remote, it'll still work. And your winch and this housing for all your winch electronics, they're IP68 rating, so you could drive this into a river and operate it with it submerged, and you don't have to worry about water or anything getting into your winch and damaging it. All right, so when you're winching, you want to make sure you always have a minimum of 10 wraps on the winch drum. So you can see in here, when I say wraps, I mean one of these layers of rope. You want at least this much on there, because that's what gives you the pulling power. There is this black sleeve on here, so if you're spooling this out and this black sleeve starts to come out, that's how you know you've gone too far. You want to make sure that you have the minimum amount of rope on the drum before you start winching. All right, so another thing to note about the winches is as you add load to your winch, the more load that you're pulling, the higher the amp draw is going to be and the lower the line speed is going to be. So you can check your owner's manual to see how that breaks down for different loads for each size winch. So something you want to keep in mind for that is as the amp draw increases, you want to make sure that your vehicle's electrical system can handle that. And that's why you always want to have your vehicle on while you're winching in, to make sure that you don't drain your battery, because your vehicle will keep charging that while it's on. To engage and disengage the clutch on your winch, that's what this handle here is for. So we have a nice beefy handle here that's going to be easy to grab and turn while you're holding gloves. So in this position, your clutch is engaged, which means you can use your remote to spool in and out the winch. If you're pulling your rope line out, you want to have this in free spool, and that'll make it quicker and easier on the winch to pull out. So you just take your clutch handle, switch it to free spool, and that'll allow you to just grab your rope and just pull it out by hand. All right, so next we're going to quickly go over the remote. So the remote has 3 buttons on here. The top one's your power button. Hold that down to turn the remote on. Hold it down again to turn the remote off. Or if the remote's not used for 2 minutes, it'll automatically turn off. This power button will light up red when the remote is on. So the next button down on your winch is the out button. Holding that will have the winch power the rope out. And then same thing with your in button down at the bottom. Holding that in button will pull the rope back into the winch. So the remote and the control box that come with your winch are linked together. So your remote can only control this winch. No one else's remote is going to be able to accidentally operate your winch. The remote can also be controlled by a wire. So this wire will actually come with your winch as well. So if your battery in your remote does die, you can still operate it using the wired connection. You can also replace the battery by removing the screws on the back of your remote. All right, so to set up the wired connection for your remote, the wire has one plug that goes into the top of the remote, like this. And then the other side of that connection will go into the port on the control box. There's a rubber plug to keep dust out, so you can pull that off and then plug this right into there. So an important thing to note with your remote, you want to make sure that you never leave this in a place where it can accidentally be operated when you're out here working on the winch. Our remote does have the buttons recessed to prevent accidental pushes, but you want to make sure you always know where this is and it's in a safe spot that isn't actually accidentally going to engage the winch while you're out here working on it. All right, so we recommend storing your remote somewhere it's easily accessible. If you get stuck, you might not be able to access the back of your vehicle. So we like to keep it in the glove box. So we have our remote and our remote wire in there for easy access if we get stuck. All right, so Bourne Off-Road winches use synthetic rope. Synthetic rope is a lot safer and easier to maintain than steel cable. But a couple things to keep in mind with that is you want to make sure you always have a minimum of 10 wraps of the rope on the winch drum. You also want to make sure that your rope stays clean. So when you finish recovery, you can soak your rope in a bucket of clean water and then hang it up in the sun to dry before you spool it in. This will help maintain the life of your rope. So when you spool your rope out, there's a section of abrasion sleeve on there. So if you're going to do a recovery and your rope is contacting any object like a log or a rock, you can put that abrasion sleeve there to protect the rope even further. So when you're spooling your rope back up onto your winch, make sure you spool that up under tension. We go over how to do that properly in our owner's manual as well as our winch installation video. You want to make sure your rope goes onto your drum in nice even layers. You can do that by making sure the rope is being pulled in as perpendicular to the vehicle as possible. Some other safety things to note when you're using your rope. When you're doing a recovery, you want to make sure you always use a line damper. This helps in case the rope ever breaks. The line damper will have the rope drop to the ground instead of it flinging back. When you're spooling your rope in, you want to make sure you're avoiding shock loads. If you're helping the recovery by driving your vehicle along, if any slack develops, make sure you slowly take that in before continuing to winch. If shock loads are applied to the winch, it can exceed the rating of the winch and damage the components. All right, so our fairlead has this big radius around the opening. That helps protect your rope even further, but you still want to make sure you never have extreme angles when spooling in your rope. You can check the owner's manual for the angles that we recommend not exceeding. When you're spooling in the rope, you want to make sure that it's coming in as perpendicular to the fairlead as possible. You also want to make sure that your hands are never in the way here when you're spooling this in. Your hands could get pinched between this fairlead and rope and cause some major injuries. So you want to make sure you're always holding this leash on the hook when you're spooling in and keep your hands away from the fairlead. So if you're in a situation where your rope is at an extreme angle to the fairlead, you can use a pulley block or a recovery ring to change the angle to make your rope come in more perpendicular to the fairlead. All right, so when you're setting up a recovery, you want to make sure you always attach a hook to rated recovery points. You want to use a tree saver or shackles or something that's rated to be used as a recovery point. You never want to hook this hook back to the synthetic rope, as that could cause the rope to break. You also want to make sure you never hook this to bumpers or side steps or tow balls. Anything that's not rated as a recovery point should never be used for recovery. When you're attaching the hook to something, make sure you always attach it in this orientation with the hook facing up. That way, if something ever does happen where this hook were to break, the force will force this hook down into the ground, as opposed to if the hook was attached the other way with it facing down. If it were to break, that would cause the hook to fly upwards. It's always a good idea to practice using your winch before you actually need it in a recovery situation. And when you do use it for recovery, make sure you're always following the proper safe recovery procedures. That'll ensure that it protects your winch from damage and it'll protect you and any bystanders from injury. So for more details about your winch, you can check your owner's manual as well as our website at bourne.com. Make sure you subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with all our future videos. Thanks for watching.